Hello and welcome to Chapters, A Life in Books. I'm Hannah McInnes. Each week I step inside an independent bookshop to meet one of the British Book Awards shortlisted authors and talk about the books that shaped them. In this episode we're joined by the Queen of Poetry, Donna Ashworth, whose best-selling writing speaks to love, loss, resilience and the everyday moments that connect us all. I spoke to her online from her home in Scotland. Well, Donna, it is such a treat to have this chance to delve into your literary life. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast to hear all about the writers and the books that inspired and informed you on your path to becoming one of our most cherished poets. But just before we go back, will you tell us about your shortlisted book here on my screen for those who can see, To the Woman, Wise Words Every Woman Needs. For those who have the pleasure of it still in store, just tell us what we find within the pages.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure. So, To the Women, I'm just one of these people that I don't know how my life would have gone if it hadn't been for the web that women weave for one another along the way. And you know, I'm fascinated by the stories passed down by my granny and my mum and listening to other people's. And I just think that women have so much advice to give one another on a daily basis. And even the stuff that isn't groundbreaking, but is incredibly useful. So what do you do with all the stuff that isn't groundbreaking enough to create, you know, a real literary masterpiece out of, but nonetheless deserves somewhere to live, to be used, to be passed along? And I just started gathering all these little observations and thoughts about women and the way we need one another and we help one another. And I didn't really do it intentionally. I had just started creating all of this material, and at some point I looked at it and thought, I think this needs to go into a little book. But I wasn't an author at the time, so you know, I had the sort of issue of how does one self-publish a book? What do you do if you want to make a book and you can't get a publishing deal? So I am delighted that this book has come so far on her journey, because she started out as just a handful of loved little essays and poems that I had no idea what to do with.
Oh, do you refer to all your books as she?
Yes.
I love that. And I loved it. And I feel it comes with a bit of a warning not to read in public spaces, because it induced it really just brought such strong emotions, the words, that I kept sort of slightly sobbing on the train in a good way, in the best possible way. The best possible type of sobbing, yes. And in fact, there's a poem in there about the tears and
Serious tears, yeah.
Donna, you're joining us from, where are you currently?
I am in the hills, the Bonny Hills in the middle of Scotland, in the central region, right in the middle of Scotland.
I would genuinely so like to be there myself, but unfortunately, given that I'm not, and we're not meeting in a independent bookshop, I'd love to know, if we were, where would we be? Where would you wish for this conversation to be taking place?
Well, you would be in for a real treat, because the village, two villages along, tiny little villages along the hills here, and just two villages along is one of my most favourite bookshops. It's like, I think that most women have this sort of innate desire to open a bookshop and a cafe at some point in their lives. You know, it lives there in your imagination. And if I could, this would be it. It's called the Wee Bookshop in Dollar, and it is magical. It is just the coziest, most stylish little bookshop with a beautiful little cafe. And it's, you know, twinkly lights and beautiful books and a few little trinkets that you can buy and homemade cakes. And it is, yeah, I'm pretty sure I manifested it, because I need a bookshop like that nearby. And so when I saw the sign first being, you know, put up and heard the rumours that it was opening, because my mum and dad live really close to it, I was just delighted. So I've been able to do a couple of little events there, but mostly I just pop in whenever I'm passing and buy a book, which is my favourite thing in the world to do.
Oh my gosh, it sounds An actual dream. I said I wish I was in Scotland, but now I really want to. That's the Wee Bookshop. Is
The
that
Wee
right?
Bookshop, which obviously in Scotland means little, the little bookshop
Yeah.
in Dollar, and it is adorable.
Amazing. We'll have to do another podcast there
Come
next
along.
time. So we go back then now to the books that shaped your life and led you to the place that you are now. Do you know, can you remember your first book-shaped memory or book-related memory?
It's an interesting question. So I remember so many things about books from my formative years, very early on. But one of them that really stands out, and I'm going to have to try and find this book, because it was a book of rhyming tales, perhaps a mixture of nursery rhymes and fairy tales, and it included The Ugly Bug Ball. Have you ever heard of The Ugly Bug Ball?
Yes, yeah.
Come one, come all to the ugly bug ball. Now, that was a poem about accepting yourself, whatever you thought about your appearance or whether you fitted in or didn't. So I'm looking back at that and I'm thinking, wow, that is so similar to the sort of hue in which I write now, which is to try and remind ourselves that we're all perfectly imperfect. And, you know, your uniquenesses and your differences are my favourite things about anybody. So The Ugly Bug Ball was in this beautifully illustrated rhyming book that I remember adoring as a child, but I don't know the name of it. But I also remember very fondly. Do you remember Mr. Pink Whistle?
Oh, I remember the Ugly Bug Ball, but I don't think I do remember Mr. Pink Whistle.
So Mr. Pink Whistle was an Enid Blyton series of books about a friendly little magical man, I think. And from what I can remember, he used to come and fix people's lives in the night and help them and make things better and do really kind things while people. That's what I remember about it. And he wore a pink suit, I think. So yeah, I loved Mr. Pink Whistle.
Oh, you know, I'm actually going to see the Magic Faraway Tree today about Enid Blyton. So if
Gorgeous.
if it's not the same one, then is one of those the book you most adored as a child, or was that something different?
I think I loved Mr. Pink Whistle. I loved
Mm.
anything by Enid Blyton,
Mm.
though. And I loved, do you remember the story of, was it the Everlasting Porridge Pot?
Oh yeah,
That
yes.
really stands out in my mind as a story that I love to hear over and over. I don't know why, but this porridge pot that wouldn't stop create abundance. Abundance, abundance.
I mean, it's brilliant. Funnily enough, the Ugly Bug Ball. I remember singing it somewhere. That's a really
Yeah.
strong memory for me. But I'm not going. I won't do that now.
I just remember that one line, come one, come all to the ugly bug
Yeah.
ball. And I thought, isn't it wonderful that there is a ball for the non-beautiful animals? You know, that's what it was saying. This is where the ugly bugs can come. And I obviously related to that very
Yeah.
much at the time.
I mean, it's amazing. That's exactly what is so. When you delve into these sorts of questions, you really do see how something that long ago could shape the author and the poet that you became quite a few years later. And
Yeah.
so, what about in that same vein, the book or perhaps the author that made you think, believe you also could be a writer, could be a poet? Do you think there was someone or something that inspired you?
So I think I'm still with Enid Blyton here because I'm going sort of through my childhood and it went from to Mallory Towers. Remember Mallory Towers?
Yes.
I loved Mallory Towers because I think that was the sort of series of books that taught me as a slightly older child that you could escape to worlds that were not so fantastically, imaginatively, magically different, but would take you out of the world that you were in whenever you needed to go and visit somebody else's plane of existence and, you know, find comfort and that sort of the joy of coming out of your own reality and into another that you're familiar with. So I think that was when I started to think this is actually a magical power, being able to write stories and write things that will take people away from their current moment into wherever you want them to go. So yeah, still with Enid Blyton.
So that makes me think of one of the other questions about the literary world you would most, if you could choose, I think this is perhaps the hardest, but best, an idea of the literary world that you would most like to escape to. If you could just press a button and pop up in a literary world, which would it be? The same one or something
But I
different?
mean, I'm quite a fearful person. I'm not, I'm not a sort of a hardy type. So I don't want to go anywhere too dangerous or, where danger lurks around every corner. But it's got to be, I mean, it's so obvious and so popular, but it would have to be the world of Harry Potter and Hogwarts, and just for the absolute majesty of the intricate little magical things, and just the joy of it all. I love that.
Drinking butterbeer.
Absolutely.
Would you have the courage to play Quidditch? You said you
No,
weren't brave. No.
no, I might cheerlead or, sit on the sidelines and throw encouragement out. I can do that.
So the next question is hypothetical, I hope, but you have to imagine you have a friend who has never read a book. Imagine that they were brought up in a society, perhaps books were banned, and they come to you because now they're free, they can read their first book. What should that be?
I mean, that is a huge question. Isn't that such a massive question? And what a wonderful question. Again, I think it would have to be, if they've never read a book before, you would want that person to experience the utter thrill of something so completely enveloping and all consuming. So, when I was a younger teenager, I absolutely adored The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy for that reason. And the excitement of knowing that there was another book, at the end of that you could continue your love affair. So I think I don't read a lot of fantasy books now, but I think that experience would be the one that I would want them to have.
Yes, really interesting. You'd want them to have that sort of that whole all-consuming
Absolutely.
reading at its most powerful.
All your senses, absolutely everything. It completely takes you somewhere that you have no idea could exist or you could go to. So, and I think whilst movies are wonderful, books do it in a way that, movies never can.
And do you think that that would be the book? I feel like maybe you're going to say no because of what you said at the start and you don't read so much fantasy. If you yourself could take just one book off with you to, say, a desert island, what book would that be?
No, completely different.
Yeah.
So I have a very intricate mind. So I'm neurodivergent. I have a very overactive mind constantly, overthink, overfeel, all of the overs. So I have to work quite hard on maintaining that calm within my own self. And so if I was to be stranded somewhere and that was all that I had, I would want to take You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, because she is the soundtrack to any sort of inner calmness that I have crafted over the decades. Her affirmations and her way of viewing the brain, mind, body, spirit connection, and how to make that all work well for your human experience whilst you're on this planet. And that book would keep me right. So I would need it. I would need it.
Brilliant. Do you know, as we speak, I'm looking at a book called The Overthinking Cure.
Oh, yeah.
For another podcast, which is very good advice for all of those things that I think many of us need. Which book, and I think this is such a good but such a hard thing to imagine or to think of one, but made you perhaps think about something differently or someone, or changed your mind? We talked before about the power of a fantasy book, but if books have a power, it's often to make you think differently in a way that other things just can't. Is there one particular book that stands out you remember changing your thoughts on something?
Yeah, that would have to be The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, because I remember reading that as a very young person, and actually it's time for me to reread that book. And I remember thinking, I won't ever look at anything the same ever again. And that's that. and that has remained true. That was the first time I was able to sort of jump out of all perspectives that I had. You don't really know as a teenager about perspectives. You certainly didn't when we were younger. You don't think about your perspective on things. They just are. They're just what's conditioned into you from school and society and family. So I think that was the first time that I ever realized that, perspectives are a thing, and they make a huge difference on every single choice that you make every single day in the way you view the world. So yeah, that was the first time that I experienced a big ground shift through a book in reality.
And that's the power of now.
Power of now, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a definitely one I would recommend everybody to read once.
Okay, that's really interesting. I think everyone's scribbling that down, especially coming from you. And would you say that you can name a book? You know, you've said a literary world you'd like to escape to. We've talked of quite a lot of book wonders, but what about something that really unnerved you or unsettled you?
Ben Elton has a knack of being able to unsettle me. So I read one of his books, I think it was called Gasping, and it was about a world in which you had to buy your right to air, to your air supply. And so certain people had, rich in oxygen air, and certain people had poor air. And it was so almost tangible. You could really begin to see that happening. It's a long time since I've read that book, but he also wrote another one that was quite similar in concept, a bit more dystopian. But yeah, that unnerved and unsettled me. I think some authors have got a way of looking, a few steps into a possible future that isn't particularly an attractive one, and bringing it back to you, and you go, oh no, that's a bit too terrifying to think about. But yeah, that unnerved me and unsettled me.
I feel quite unsettled and unnerved just hearing about that one. It really makes your hair sort of stand on end, just the concept as you relay it. So can you please cheer me up by telling me about the character in literature that you most fell in love with?
Do you know what? I mean, these are such big questions. I know. The minute somebody asks you to assign one, the choice, it has to be a bit of Bridget. I mean, I just think, Bridget Jones came along and and made so many of us feel so much better about ourselves and so seen. And whilst it was comedic and funny and so on, what it did actually do was allow us to love ourselves a little bit more for our flaws and our imperfections, and start to possibly even see them as little celebrations. And that's not a small thing. That's actually a huge feat for an author to have done under the guise of something, entertaining and comedic. It actually brought a generation of women who were not taught how to love themselves into a place where they could view themselves less strictly and more kindly. So I related hard to Bridget Jones, and I think many of us did.
Yeah, that's a wonderful choice. And would you say Helen Fielding and reading Bridget Jones had an impact on you and your writing and your poetry?
Yes, I mean, I think anything that you take in and find yourself in, you then take with you, don't you? And it was such a movement, it was such a generational thing that there was no way that you couldn't be affected by it. And I loved the way she moved on as well. I loved, the way she then tackled grief in certain stages. And again, she brought us all with her there, which is, a wonderful thing to do. It wasn't just a moment in time. We got to continue that on. So yeah, I just think it is a wonderful thing for an author to be able to if she can change somebody who reads her books' perception of themselves through the main character or any of the characters, then what a job to have done.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, you can't underestimate the power of it. The comedy sometimes makes you forget just how powerful actually the message about self-acceptance
has a big impact.
I mean, when you talked about the power of now, you said you read it a while ago, and that book also a big impact, the biggest impact on your life.
Yes.
rather feel it's time to read it again. I mean, is there a book that you think deserves reading again and again, that you sort of come back to and take off the shelf and a reread never gets dull?
Well, I mean, I refer to my You Can Heal Your Life all the time, because that is kind of like my radio station that plays in the background of my consciousness. So that's definite. But self-help books and things like that aside, there is an author that I think you have to read a few times to really get the full scope of him. I just think he's absolutely wonderful. And the way that he describes the world to people and the little nuances and intricacies that he picks up on is Bill Bryson. So his books to me are just an unending joy. I could pick them up again and again and again, and I will read something different every time that I do. I think it is it Neither Here Nor There, or is it Here, There or Everywhere, was one of my favourites when he was travelling through Europe. Just the way that he views people and humanity and culture and the differences between us all, but the similarities that run, underneath. I love Bill Bryson.
Would he be the person you would most like to have a coffee with, author-wise? Or would that be Helen Fielding or Enid Blyton? Because it's again no small question, given that you can choose, alive or dead, which author you would most want to sit down and have a coffee with.
It is a real tearing of a question. It would have to be, there's so many people. I'd love to have a coffee with Marianne Keyes. I'd love to have a coffee with Mary Oliver. I'd love to have a coffee with Emily Dickinson. I'd love to have a coffee. There's not really an author that I love or admire or read that I would not want to have a coffee with.
Well, it's true. And it could be a glass of wine. Have you had a coffee with Marianne Keyes?
No, but I would absolutely love to have a coffee. Marianne, if you're listening.
Oh, that needs to happen.
Everything Marianne writes is magic to me. I patiently wait for it to come and devour it immediately. And I can reread Marianne Keyes novels again and again and again. Watermelon and, just Rachel's Holiday, just amazing books.
Brilliant. And it could be one of these, the answer to this next question. And I feel like at the moment, this to me is the question that I'm clinging to, people's answers for my own recommendations, because I think we all need balm and comfort books right now. So which book would you say would and could provide the most comfort or balm when times are tough, apart from yours?
Yeah. Thank you. That's very kind.
I would say really do that in Spain.
I hope so. That was my why behind them. Just a small moment in time. You've got 5 minutes. Can you get something from each page? But I love Matt Haig for this. I think Matt Haig is, I'm just such a huge fan of Matt's. I think he's an amazing human and a wonderful writer. His last book, The Life Impossible, was a beautiful book that I completely and utterly adored, and would pick that up again in a heartbeat to read if I felt like I needed reminding, because I think when times are hard, what you need to know is that everybody faces hard times, and you're going to get through it, and you're going to feel like yourself again. The sun will come back, the lightness will return, this weight will lift. That's what you need to hear in the moment. And his stories do that, his books do that, all of his books, I would say. But The Comfort book, a wonderful book, but The Life Impossible is the one that's springing to my mind.
I didn't let you say it, but I certainly can say yours definitely are that balm. I mean, while I've been reading to the women, I've been recommending it to so many people going through so many different things, because you know that actually whatever it is you're going through, you can just find solace with it within the pages. And you're right, sort of same boatism is, it's a strange thing to find comfort in a way, knowing other people are going through things.
Yeah.
And it's one of the sort of strongest source of consolation, isn't it?
I agree. The feeling of being alone with something is the most dangerous feeling there is. I think that place where you think, I'm alone, no one can understand me, is a dangerous place to be mentally. So the minute you read something else that somebody has written that you then realise they have been through something, even if it's not exactly the same, but you know it will have tested them in the same depth of ways, you feel comforted automatically. You know that this is a human experience. And there is definite salve there in knowing that everybody who has been there, you know, hopefully has got through it, and so will you.
Salve is a good word.
Yes.
So this is just a small question. As you know, you've noticed, we only like to ask very easy, answerable questions on this podcast. So is there a book? I'm afraid I'm being sarcastic because is there a book that changed your life?
Yeah, it's got to be Louise Hay.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt about that, because I would say Louise Hay saved my life. That's how dramatic I'm willing to go on that. Because I was in a very dark place when I first found her book. And I found her, when I say found it, I went out of my way to get it, because self-help books of that ilk weren't really readily available 3 decades ago. And so I had got this book somehow from America, and it was exactly what I needed. It was a toolkit. It felt like a life raft. I felt like even just the holding of it in my bag and on my person would keep me afloat physically. That's how, you know, how amazing this book felt to me. And the concepts that she had in there, that you had the power with your thoughts to change your reality. My life was never the same again after that, and it never has been. And I wouldn't be writing how I'm writing now, or poems at all, probably, if it wasn't for her bringing me back to a place where I could carry on.
God, that's so good. And do you reread that again and again, or?
Yes, it's here somewhere, I think. Hold on. There it is.
Your Bible. Okay, amazing.
You know what? I don't so much reread it as I just need it around.
Yeah.
I know what's in that book, just like I know what's in several books that I really love. But the physical having them there is the thing. You know, it provides some sort of, I don't know, reminder that when I look at it, I don't even need to open it up. I'm reminded of what's in there and what is now in here.
So this is, I think, more perhaps easier for you to answer, but whether there's a book that particularly inspired this book, To the Women, Wise Words Every Woman Needs, this book of poetry, something that fed into this one.
Not a book in particular, but all women who write, and all women who share, and all women who try and do things to provide, you know, elements for other women to cling to and use and pass on the advice and the stories. So therefore, every single female writer that I've ever imbued and devoured and loved will probably have come out somewhere in some sort of way through that, in that book, because I always say I feel like I'm at a huge meeting of women and I'm taking the minutes. So these are sort of observations and listenings and things that I'm watching happen, interactions between women. So there will not be a female writer who has not come through there somehow, in some way, but not a particular book. No, this is a book that I wanted. So I kind of thought, I would love to make this book. I don't see it, it's not around. Maybe I could make it a book where we can very simplistically open it. And, you know, in this modern day and age, we're so busy, we don't have a huge amount of time for things. We have popcorn brain as well from scrolling and so on. So things need to jump out in a different way now than they did in the past. We don't have much time to get into things and take our time and delve. Now we just need, please jump out at me and grab me in this moment and change me. That's what we want. So I guess I made the book that I really needed myself.
It's so interesting. I'm watching The Other Bennett Sister at the moment, and
yes, I've just finished
time ago they keep talking about how they love poetry because it's short, and they weren't being distracted by a digital world. But
yes, and you had to switch into another part of your brain for it. Poetry. So there is a science behind it. When your brain sees a piece of poetry, because of the way it visually appears, your brain goes, I think that's a poem or a quote. And therefore you switch to a different part of your brain, because your brain knows that feelings are going to come out of this. So it's a bit like drilling through 20 layers of small talk and social niceties and going straight to a different place. And all that happens in a nanosecond when you see a poem. Your brain goes, get ready to feel. You're going to feel something here. This is not about thinking, this is about feeling.
Yeah.
And I love that about poetry. And I also love the other Bennett sister. That is I just adore Mary Bennett.
She is. I could do a whole nother podcast just devoted to that. I couldn't agree more. And it's so interesting that it is all about feeling and emotions. And I said at the start tonight that is exactly what it does, really bring on those very powerful emotions. So a quick fire for these last questions. If you were a judge, which book would you give a British Book Award to?
Oh, do you know, that is another huge question, but I'm going to go with my knee jerk, what just came in.
Yeah.
I finished a book quite recently called The Wedding People.
Oh, I've heard lots of things about this.
Yeah, and the name of the author has escaped me in this moment. I'm so sorry. But I just thought it was a brilliant book. It was a brilliant book at tackling huge topics in such a way that we can all come along for the ride and learn something very big along the way in such an entertaining way. Brilliant book. Loved it.
Alison Esbach, I think, is the
Alison Esbach. Wonderful book.
I've heard a lot about that. That's going definitely on the list.
Yes.
It's getting a lot of good reviews at the moment. What are you currently reading?
Nothing at the moment because, well, I tell a lie, I just finished The Wedding People, but I am going to pick up this one. Now, this is by Donna French. And Dawn French has got a new book coming out called Enough, which I'm very excited about. But I love everything Dawn writes. But it's been a while since I've read this one, and it's time. I don't know if I actually got to finish this one, and so I'm going back in, and I'm very excited.
So that's Dawn French
because of you.
Because of you. And do you have a perfect sort of reading situation? Where would we find you in your reading position of place of choice?
Definitely my chaise. You can't quite see it. It's just behind me there. I'll just move that to show you. A little reading nook in the corner of my room, preferably when it's raining outside. And however, I do most of my reading when I'm on holiday. I think that is just such a common thing for women and, you know, mums as well of a certain age, because it's hard to fit it in. You have to intentionally make it happen, don't you? But on holiday, it's so much easier. But yeah, if it's raining outside, I've got a cup of tea, some sort of snackage available, and my little nook, then I am in heaven. Heaven.
For people who aren't watching, the little nook, could just show us again so we could just sort of describe it. It's like almost like an Egyptian seat. Pharaoh's.
It's a little chaise lounge with a lovely blanket, a little table at the side, perfect book height. I've got my Buddha statue there for peace and calm.
Yep.
I've got my big palm behind me and my fairy lights.
And someone's serving you grapes.
That would be the perfect element to include there. That would be wonderful. So yeah, that's my little reading corner.
Oh, it is such a treat, as I said at the start, and I didn't even know quite what a treat it would be to hear all of those, and just to, I think the wonderful thing is so many different places that you go to, you know, it's all so rich and different. And I suppose that's exactly what happens to shape an author. It's
Yes.
not ever one thing. It's so many different inspirations and genres. And so thank you very, very much. And I hope that you get your coffee with Marianne Keyes.
I would love that. I shall report back to you. You might have manifested that for me.
This is
Thank you so much for having me.